Synergy Loves Company.
With activations across our Synergy machine.
We have this coterie of rich franchises, the company now, that people want to engage with.
I came here to try and continue what Walt Disney and his associates set in motion 50 years ago, which is to experiment with every new and innovative kind of entertainment possible.
It's what we hope to do here, to really develop something that, just more than an entertainment enterprise. It's something that contributes many other ways.
Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where Disney connects to everything. I'm Eric Hathorn, and keeping me company today is you listening to the show. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is another solo show. Now it's almost a couple of months ago in October, I did a solo show, and then here we are, November. Hopefully you listened to the show with Adam from Engineering Theme Parks. I had a lot of fun with him, and here I am back, all just me and you, with something to talk about with Disney, of course. So if you clicked on the episode, you probably know that we're going to talk about A&E and Disney. This is like, I'm excited because this is like the company part. So the show is called Synergy Loves Company, and I always kind of wanted to dive into things with the Walt Disney Company because I kind of follow, in addition to just being a Disney fan and following all the movies and the theme parks and all that kind of stuff, I kind of geek out when it comes to the business of it. So I really love to think about like all those companies that Disney owns and kind of how they leverage it, hence the synergy. So I wanted to get started talking about this one with A&E Art and Entertainment, the A&E Network, and Disney. It's one of those forgotten ones that slips under the radar that we don't always think of as a Disney property, but Disney does own a good chunk of A&E. And I kind of today want to get into the history of the relationship between A&E and Disney, and just kind of talk about how it came to be, and then kind of what's there to be explored. What, maybe how we could think about how Disney should leverage owning parts of A&E, or maybe how they don't often leverage that. So anyways, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about A&E and the Walt Disney Company. So I think I got to start before I even talk about A&E itself. We do have to talk about cable, and we do have to talk about Hearst, because these two things are going to come in real big with Disney and A&E, because you can't have Disney A&E without cable, and you can't have Disney and A&E without the Hearst Company. So we'll get into it a little bit, but let's go into cable first, because cable is kind of where this story begins. So even before Disney got involved with cable, and before A&E was a thing, cable had been around since the 1940s. In the 40s, cable was a way for kind of remote areas to get TV that they couldn't really pick it up from the nearest city from a broadcast signal. So they'd have these super antennas that would pick up the broadcast from a major city, and then it would rebroadcast it through cable lines to TVs. So cable had been around for a really long time, but it really didn't start to become what we think of cable TV as until about the 70s. And HBO was really big into getting in this satellite version of cable, where they would beam satellite signals so that everyone around the nation could see the same TV programs, basically at the same time. So we've got HBO coming in. This was about the early 70s, and they kind of kicked this cable idea into high gear just after HBO TBS got in the game of the kind of national satellite channels, and they had some success, and now everyone wanted to get involved. So TBS before that had just been kind of that small local TV station that kind of made it big and, you know, got recognized on a national level. So all these other media companies started deciding, we want to get part of this cable, you know, we want a piece of this. So in the late 70s and early 80s, that's when a lot of people started getting into cable. But it wasn't so cut and dry. It wasn't like, you know, like, oh, let's just buy one of these cable companies. Everyone kind of was experimenting. Channels were, you know, like buying time on kind of a cable channel. Like maybe they would have the mornings and share that same channel with a different network who would take the nighttime feed. And they would try different things where they would maybe team up with each other to fill the time of the cable channel that they were doing. No one really wanted to go all in on it yet. So that's where we get to the Arts channel. And so the Arts channel was a combination between Hearst Media and ABC Video Service. Now, yes, I haven't talked yet about Disney. They're coming, but you can probably already tell where I'm going with this, because I said that the Arts channel that came out in 1982 is part of Hearst and ABC. And of course, you know, spoiler alert, ABC, Disney's going to get involved with that coming up later on in our story. So let's talk about Hearst real quick. I said we got to talk about cable and we got to talk about Hearst. And so Hearst had been making newspapers since the 1800s, the late 1800s. They actually bought the San Francisco Examiner in 1880 and then started to buy up all these different newspapers all over the United States. So newspapers is where they really got their start. Actually, here's the Disney connection. In 1899, there was a big newsboy strike in New York because the price of the papers had gone up after the war, the Spanish-American War, and this was the topic of Newsies. One of the big kind of newspapers that was raising the prices in kind of a back and forth thing was Hearst. So that real life event where Hearst was raising the prices of their papers, and them and some, of course, other publishers too, brought those prices up, kind of driving that price hike, and that's what led to the Newsboy strike. And the Newsies, our favorite Disney movie musical from the early 90s, my favorite, at least one of my favorites. I'll say one of my favorites, comes out of that experience there. So there you go. Hearst newspapers already leading to some Disney content, but that's not what we're here to talk about. It's not about Newsies. Maybe we'll talk about Newsies another time. So they eventually got into, you know, making magazines later on in the early 1900s. And we get Cosmopolitan magazine, still around today, Good Housekeeping magazine, the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. That's all Hearst. Hearst has a lot of magazines now. Even things like Runner's World is a Hearst magazine, and like HGTV magazine. Those are Hearst products too. So there's a lot of magazines that are still out there that are under the Hearst umbrella. In the 1920s, though, Hearst started moving away from paper and into TV. And one of the things they did is they would buy local TV affiliates from the big major broadcasters. So, for instance, they had some ABC affiliates in some markets. And so they had a relationship with ABC. And so when this cable thing came around, it was a good way for the two of them, ABC and Hearst, to kind of combine efforts and come up with this company, the Hearst ABC Video Services. And then they thought that they could use the Hearst ABC Video Services to create programming that they could use for a channel of their own. And that's where they came up with the Alpha Repository. Oh, let me get it right. The Alpha Repository Television Service, which Alpha Repository Television Service is ARTS. So Arts. So they called it Arts. They did use their video services and all their other things to launch some other stations. They had one called Beta, which later was called Daytime, which we'll have to talk about later because that eventually becomes Lifetime. More on that later when we talk. And they start making programming. Now, they didn't make enough with ARTS, or Alpha Repository Television Service. They didn't make enough programming to fill a whole block, so they actually started out sharing their time with Nickelodeon. So Nickelodeon was on earlier and ARTS was on later. So this is that experimental time at the beginning of the 80s when everyone's trying different things. And so ARTS is later, Nickelodeon in the morning. And they go like that for a while. For a couple of years, they are kind of paired up with Nickelodeon. And that's until the entertainment channel, NBC's version of what the ARTS channel would be like, starts failing. So let's talk really quick about what the ARTS channel was, because I just kind of introduced to you that it's a kind of combination. It's an effort between Hearst and ABC to make a channel for this new cable thing. But what did they show? So the ARTS channel, which you might kind of guess because it's called ARTS, was very similar to what we'd expect from like PBS. So PBS likes to show, you see a lot of kind of art entertainment on there. Those two words are coming together here. So art, we see a lot of like performance art. We see a lot of, just general like architecture, those kind of, we could think of those like finer things in life kind of things from the art station, just like you would see on PBS. The entertainment channel was actually also a similar channel, but with the name like the entertainment channel, a lot of people got it confused with like HBO and Showtime and those kind of movie channels. So people were expecting one thing from it with the name entertainment channel, and they were getting more arts, and they were maybe passing it up sometimes because they were like, well, let's go see what's on the entertainment channel. Do we want to watch the entertainment channel or HBO? And they decided, we don't want to watch the entertainment channel. That's not what we were looking for. Let's go watch that movie on HBO. So it kind of fell apart after a while. The entertainment channel was actually the NBC version of the ARTS channel. So in the same way that the ARTS channel was ABC's way of getting into cable, the entertainment channel was NBC's way of getting into cable. So when NBC wasn't hitting too well with the entertainment channel, they decided to merge it with, sell it to ARTS and Hearst and ABC. So Hearst and ABC buys the entertainment channel. NBC and the Rockefeller Group, who is kind of involved a little bit with the entertainment channel, they were kind of invested in it, but not really a media partner in it. They become the owners of the entertainment channel. So ARTS, the ABC and Hearst part is the ABC and Hearst each own about 38% of the new Arts and Entertainment Network, and NBC and the Rockefeller Group own that last about 25%. So a smaller chunk for those other two, because they were actually trying to kind of get out of the game. So the Arts and Entertainment Network is this new network, and it only is called the Arts and Entertainment Network for about a year before they decide to change it to A&E a little bit later, which we'll get into. But I want to stop for a second. And as this is going down in 1984, when A&E is becoming a thing, the Arts and Entertainment Network, there's also a lot of other things going on in the world of cable and in the world of Disney. So far I haven't talked a lot about Disney. I've been talking about ABC. I've been talking about Hearst, NBC, but not a lot of Disney. So let's go talk about Disney really quick, because in 1984 is when the Disney Channel launches and cable starts gaining popularity, and a lot of media companies are deciding that this is the time to get in. And one of the big reasons is because just after A&E is created and those two companies merge to make the Arts and Entertainment Channel, the U.S. government passes the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984, which starts to deregulate cable and make it easier for people to get cable, for different companies to make content for cable. It makes it easier all around, and this is really when cable starts to boom and starts to become even more popular across the nation. So, ABC and Hearst and NBC, I did talk about Rockefeller Group. They get out of it, not too much later than this, a little bit. In the early 90s, they got out of it, but they didn't really have the programming end of it. They weren't really into broadcast. They were just more of an investor. So for all intents and purposes, ABC, Hearst, and NBC continue on with the Art and Entertainment Network, shorten it to A&E, and they start showing, they really continue showing that PBS style programming that both of them, the Arts Network and the Entertainment Network, originally were, meant to show. That's like what they set out to do. In fact, this was kind of a cool, kind of a cool fact here. When they set out to make the A&E network, the combination of the two, one of the things they did is they started putting their programs on videotape, and they would put them in libraries all around the U.S. where they would share them, and it was the cable video library, they called it, and they provided all those resources for a lot of public libraries. So I thought that was cool as a librarian, but I digress. So A&E keeps making this, kind of artsy PBS style entertainment. They're the first place where you could see a classical music video. So MTV, really big in the 80s, VH1 coming around the late 80s, early 90s, and really big with music videos. Arts and Entertainment was going to be a place, A&E was going to be a place where you could see classical music videos. So in 1986, they actually showed the first one of these. I don't think it was as popular as they were hoping it would be. They don't really show too many more, but it was a cool idea, something to try. And then in 1987, they probably get their biggest program ever, and that's Biography. For me, at least, Biography is pretty synonymous with A&E. That's the show that I think of when I think of like the A&E shows of my childhood when I grew up, when we eventually got cable. Biography was kind of the thing that was A&E's go-to. It wasn't necessarily my thing, but it was A&E's thing. As I got older, of course, I grew to love it. But Biography wasn't an A&E invention. It had been around before in syndication. They just got the rights to make new episodes, to show older episodes, and they kind of ran away with it, and it became a runaway hit with A&E in the late 80s and the early 90s, and it's gonna kind of make a big impact on what A&E becomes later on. It became their biggest program of the 80s and into the early 90s until A&E in the 90s start airing episodes of Law and Order. Okay, I have to stop here and talk about, we're going from PBS style programming to, in the 90s, they start showing Law and Order, which becomes really popular on A&E. And it's not really in line with what they set out to do. So I don't know how I feel about that. But of course, shows like Law and Order and that, like, they have become staples. That kind of like, we're going to show the reruns in syndication, have become staples of daytime cable, those marathons of sitcoms and hour-long dramas. That's really, cable does a lot of that. You might see that on your cable today. That's kind of what I've recognized cable to have become. So when Law and Order comes to A&E in the 90s, I think this is the beginning of their giant channel drift from fine arts programming to other stuff. So yeah, Law and Order. They keep Law and Order from the mid 90s until the 2000s, the early 2000s. And it's like one of their biggest programming items, even though they didn't create it. And it kind of gives them the sense that maybe they should just be showing syndicated shows. And that's, like you said, that's when we start to drift to other things. But don't worry, in 1994, they also launched the first of a new channel, which is the History Channel. So the History Channel is a part of that A&E family. So now the A&E family has A&E and the History Channel. It's becoming a little bit bigger than what it started out to be. So we see that kind of channel growing and aging and acquiring other channels onto it. And so in 1994, A&E is kind of a big cable powerhouse. And then ABC, the part owner of A&E, of course, gets sold. ABC Cap Cities gets sold to the Walt Disney Company. So here it is. This is where Disney comes into play with A&E. Here we go. This is where it's going down. At this time, the COO of ABC Cap Cities is, of course, our CEO of Disney, Bob Iger. So Bob Iger actually takes over kind of the Disney stuff. He had that A&E under his umbrella, though he wasn't like in the day-to-day, of course, with it. He becomes that he moves over to the Disney side. Go read Disney War. There's a whole bunch about what he does and Michael Eisner and where we got to today. But he's our Disney guy. He's, bringing ABC and Cap Cities and A&E all over to the Disney Company. Now I say that, but like A&E doesn't give a lot to Disney, which is interesting because it still sticks around. I feel like it doesn't give us all that much. So it does continue to expand and grow over the course of time. When after Disney took them over, they had launched the History Channel, and they launched Biography Channel, and then they launch an international version of the History Channel, and they keep on kind of building those channels up. They still make it bigger. It still keeps growing, which is pretty cool. It's with Disney, it keeps growing. So when we talk about Biography Channel and the History Channel and History International with A&E, they're part of the Walt Disney Company at this point. It's one of those that we don't really think of as part of the Walt Disney Company because they only own a chunk of it. At this point, it's that, just below 40% that they own, because NBC still owns a chunk, and so does Hearst. It's not too different than kind of what happened with Hulu and Disney being a partner in Hulu. And we think of Disney as like being Hulu, but we got to remember that there's some other companies involved with that. So that's the same thing with this. We've got Hearst involved big time. We've got Disney, of course, and we still have ABC, which is about to, or we've got Hearst, ABC, and NBC. I said ABC. We've got NBC, and that's about to change a little bit because in 2009, Hearst acquires Lifetime, or Hearst and Disney. A&E acquires Lifetime. And this is kind of interesting because Hearst and Disney already owned Lifetime. Yeah, so let's talk about that really quick. So Hearst and Disney owned A&E with NBC. And then Hearst and Disney over here on the other side owns 50-50. They each own 50% of Lifetime. But the venture that they have with NBC and A&E, they use to buy Lifetime, and then they become like 42% stakeholders in this A&E Networks kind of thing that they set up with Lifetime. And then so that kind of downgrades what NBC owns of the whole company to about 16%. So it starts to kind of push them out a little bit. But now it has like a bigger umbrella of what A&E owns. They own all those ones we talked about before, history, biography, and now Lifetime. And so A&E is becoming more of a collection of channels and less of a channel on its own. They also own some like production units, like for movies, like they're going to like production studios for movies. And they're making independent films and documentaries and things like that. So it's A&E is becoming a little bit bigger than just a channel in this point. In 2011, they do rebrand to kind of distinguish between A&E, the channel, and A&E, the network company, like the group of networks. And we start seeing the plus symbol. So maybe this is the first Disney Plus. Could I say that? Could I say that the A+E for like the A&E rebrand is the first Disney Plus? I'm not going to say that. Sorry. No, I can't say that. Although the plus is everywhere now and everyone's stealing it. A+E Networks or A&E Networks is a little different than A and E, the channel, but they're all part of that same company now that started from the same A&E. So that was in 2011 when they kind of rebrand that networks logo. And then in 2012, NBC gets out of A&E. They find that they don't want to be part of it. They actually have to sell their stake in A&E to get some cash to finish the Comcast purchase of NBC Universal from GE. It's that whole thing. I'm not going to get into that because this isn't about that company. We're still talking about the Walt Disney Company, even though we're talking a lot about A&E and some other production companies. So NBC gets out at this point in 2012, and this is where A&E and all of those networks under it now are 50-50 between Hearst and ABC or Disney. So Hearst owns 50%, Disney owns 50% of A&E and all of the networks underneath it. They continue playing shows and programming that have, some fine arts, but then also those shows in the middle of the day with the syndicated dramas and sitcoms. And in 2003 or 2013, the programming of A&E Networks gets taken over by Nancy Dubik and Jana Bennett. Dubik had worked for for History Channel. She actually was the one who took an episode of one of their shows, Modern Marvels, and spun it off into a series called Ice Road Truckers. So she kind of leaned into that reality end of what they did on History. And then Bennett was the one who transformed TLC into a, read the air quotes here, lifestyle network previously in the 2000s, which we could read into as more reality programming. So what happens to A&E at this time is more reality programming in the late 2010s, or in the early 2010s, 2013. So this is where we start seeing A&E go reality. And some of the big shows, some of the more controversial shows that A&E, remember A&E started out as a kind of fine arts channel similar to PBS. And now we get shows like Hoarders, Storage Wars, Dog the Bounty Hunter, Duck Dynasty, Live PD, The First 48, and that Leah Remini's Scientology documentary. Yes, I am picking all of the most controversial ones of the last, since 2013, because I want to show how different the programming was from when they started, and they were showing some classic music or classic musical music videos, and now they're showing Dog the Bounty Hunter. Strange stuff. And so it's a very different channel than what it started out as. I want to say it's not really fulfilling its original mission statement. It's become something very different. just by looking at those shows and maybe some others. So it becomes very different than it was, but it also becomes kind of a cable powerhouse in that it houses so many other channels right now. A&E Networks is so much bigger than just A&E the channel. They've got A&E the channel, of course. They've got a channel, Crime and Investigation, plus Investigation, of course, we'll bring that plus back. The FYI channel, History, Military History, and History in Spanish or History en Español. Lifetime, because they acquired Lifetime, also has the Lifetime Movie Network and a channel called Lifetime Real Women. A&E Networks is also an investor in Vice TV, which is kind of weird because Disney, separate from A&E Networks, is also an investor in Vice TV and in Vice Media. So Disney kind of owns a little bit of Vice through A&E, but they also own a little bit of Vice on their own. And that's kind of something that maybe another episode we can tease out a little bit more, because that's an interesting relationship too. So A&E has become something bigger than it initially was. It's become something very different than it initially was. It was trying to be a fine arts station in the 80s at the beginning, kind of experimenting with this new cable idea. And now it's become this, giant conglomeration of channels that tend to skew very reality TV based across the board. The early 2000s, mid 2000s, reality TV kind of took over, and A&E Networks, of course, they all doubled down on that reality TV. So Disney doesn't do much with A&E. As you could probably see, Disney doesn't have a lot to do with A&E over the years. They kind of let it be. So Eric, why did you decide to talk about A&E and Disney? No, there's a reason. We'll get there. But I do want to say that sometimes A&E does get in the way of Disney over their history, because when A&E was kind of in the way for the Walt Disney Company when the Fox merger came up. Not here in the U.S. Disney still owns the 50% chunk with Hearst Media in the U.S. of A&E, but they don't in Europe, because Europe said to Disney, we're not going to let you own all of this. So they had to divest their A&E stake in Europe. So Disney disconnects, they cut ties with their A&E networks and kind of all the stuff that goes with it in Europe, and they become in the United States, there's still a 50% owner of A&E. All right. I do want to talk, though. Usually when I do talk about something, I usually make a suggestion of something that you should watch, something that you should get into, something that you should see. And it was hard. It was really hard for me to think of something with Disney and A&E, because they do. Even though Disney owns 50% of A&E, they don't often work together. They don't often do a lot together. Disney probably does more with Lifetime than it does with A&E. Even though Lifetime is part of A&E, they do more with Lifetime than A&E itself. It's easy to forget sometimes that Disney owns half of A&E. So I did a little digging, and I realized that a documentary that I do actually really love was made by one of those A&E divisions, A&E Indie Films, and it has a direct link to Disney. So that documentary is called Life Animated, and I'm going to suggest you go out and see it. It's really great. It's about Owen Susskind, who is autistic, and he became nonverbal at the age of 3. His family never knew if he was going to ever talk again, and he really enjoyed Disney movies. Well, the first time he did talk again, spoiler alert, sorry, go see the documentary though, he was able to use the emotional intelligence that he learned from the Disney movies to kind of tell what he saw in the world. So he really used what he learned from Disney movies to help him communicate with his family. It's a great movie. I recommend it definitely. It's an A&E movie. It talks a lot about Disney content, and I definitely recommend 5 stars, 2 thumbs up for me. Go see it. I love it. Let me know what you think about it, of course. It's great. So where do we go next with A&E and Disney? It's kind of a wasted relationship. I wanted to talk about it because it's important for us to know. And as we kind of dissect these companies that Disney's involved with, it's important for us to know like what Disney is involved with. But at the same time, they don't really leverage their relationship with A&E, their 50% ownership, as much as I really think that they could. However, this is only part of the story. Walt Disney Company and Hearst, with their relationship going back to ABC at the beginning of cable, they also own together Lifetime, which we talked a little bit about today, and they own ESPN together too, which is one we definitely think of as a big Disney company. But Hearst still owns a small chunk of ESPN. So this one, the Walt Disney Company and A&E, is actually only the first of a series of episodes that we're going to use to talk about the Disney Company's involvement with Hearst. So coming up soon on some of my solo episodes, you'll hear about Disney and ESPN and Hearst, and Disney and Lifetime and Hearst. And we'll kind of get more information about Disney and Hearst and what they have worked on and collaborated on in the past together. So there will be a lot more on Disney and Hearst. And this is really only part 1. So definitely subscribe if you want to hear the other parts of the story in this relationship with Hearst and Disney. You might have thought that I wasn't going anywhere with it, but we were going here with ESPN, Hearst, Lifetime. It's all connected. We got to see where this story takes us. All right. So if you want to connect with me on socials, we've got at Synergy Loves Company on Facebook, at Synergy Loves Company on Instagram, and at Eric H. Synergy on Twitter. That one's where I probably do most of my communication. It's kind of a personal / podcast Twitter handle. You could see me tweeting all sorts of stuff there. You could also find me online at synergylovescompany.com. That's where you can find all these podcast episodes. You could find links to my YouTube page where there's clips. You could watch a video version of this episode and see it all, podcast all warts and all. Yeah, just like I did right there. You'll be able to see any sort of flubs I did and all that stuff, but there's also visuals that go along with whatever I said. So definitely take a look at synergylovescompany.com for the YouTube channel and all the other episodes there. If you really liked what you heard on this show or one of my other episodes, definitely tell a friend about the show so that you could spread the word so that more people can hear some Synergy Loves Company. I would love it if you did. Of course, there's more episodes coming up. If you heard, so like I said at the beginning of the show, the last episode I talked to Adam from Engineering Theme Parks. I really do like to get some guests on so that they can talk to me about things that they love and I love, and Disney, of course. And of course, this is, early December. Sometimes I only get one episode out a month, but this month I'm actually going to have 2 episodes coming out, and I'm trying to hopefully make that a thing. So definitely tell a friend about the show and let them know, and to subscribe so that you don't miss any. And then hopefully I'll be able to get more and more episodes coming out through into the new year, and you'll catch them all because you and your friends that you told all subscribed. With that, I'm going to say thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I love being able to talk Disney. You're such a great listener. Get it? Because you're listening. and I'm telling you all about. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.